In addition to code expressions, Razor also supports code blocks. One example of a code block is here at the top of the view. It starts with an @, it has an opening and a closing curly brace. In between those curly braces, we can place as much C# code as we like. But what's inside is not going to be an expression that gets evaluated and sent down to the client. It is C# statements that are going to be executed. You can do things like add a property into the view bag. Here we're setting a title property. We'll see how that works later when we look at the layout view, how it can use that title property. You can have additional statements in here too. For instance, I could say var first equals model.first. That would pick out the first restaurant review out of the model. What I could do somewhere later in the view is just have a code expression that says first dot rating. So you can see we are strongly typed. IntelliSense knows that we're working against an object of type restaurant review. And that first variable that we created in the code block, that's available throughout the rest of the view. Another example of a code block is this for each statement that's down here in the middle of the view. This for each statement allows us to iterate through the model, pulling out one item at a time. And you can see that Razor allows us to transition between C# code, the for each statement, and HTML effortlessly. In fact, this closing curly brace, it doesn't get output to the client like a piece of literal text. The Razor compiler, the Razor parser, is smart enough to see that closing curly brace and say, that curly brace matches up with this curly brace. This is a code block, and that is a part of C# code. What I'd like to do to demonstrate a few features of code blocks is remove the table that we're currently using to display the latest reviews, and we're going to write this from scratch. We'll still be using a for each statement though, so let's start off with a for each var item in the incoming model. And for each item, what we're going to do is write out a div, and I want to give that div a class that I have defined in my style sheet, so div class equals review. What we'll do inside the div is have an h4 tag that contains item.restaurant.name. So in a complex type, you can have an expression that drills into an object. What we'll place in here next is a span where we will write out the item rating. So let's say rating is item.rating. And finally, we'll have a paragraph with item.body inside. Let's save that and refresh our view to see what it looks like now. And now we still have all of our reviews, including Joe's Deep Fried Bacon Cheeseburger Shack, but we're not using a table, and let's explore a few things inside of this code block that we just wrote. Again, Razor is quite good at transitioning between C# code and HTML. It understands this opening curly brace as part of a C# statement. It understands this text div as part of HTML, but there are some scenarios that will trip it up. Let's say we wanted to put out the word review before every div. If we try to do that, we will find we have a compiler error because Razor thinks that it's still in C# mode. There's two ways to fix this. One is to use a text tag. That's an explicit way to transition the Razor parser from C# mode into text mode, and if we do that, our view will be fixed. We'll be outputting the text review, and let's look at the source code, and we can see that text, that tag, that is not sent down to the client. It's simply a delimiter that tells Razor, oh, I need to switch from C# back into HTML mode. There's another way to do this that is a little bit shorter, and that is to use @::. And when we do that, we'll have the same result here, but it's a little easier to type. And everything that we put after @::, is treated as text. We're not going to be tricking the Razor parser into thinking this is C# code that's starting again. It won't do that until it sees an @ expression later on when we're trying to output the restaurant name.